Hello, everyone. As Martina said, I am Kelly Wayment, and I have been teaching silhouette classes for a long time, and we're talking some about the rotary blade today and a lot about crepe paper. And crepe paper is one of my very favorite mediums to use with my silhouette machines. So some of you might be here to learn more about the rotary blade. Some of you might be here to learn the basics of using crepe paper for crepe paper flowers, and some of you just want to see the Cameo 5 in action. Regardless of the reason you are here, I am happy that you're here, and you can ask questions in the chat, and Jackie will let me know if there are questions. I will keep a little bit of an eye on the chat, but mostly I'll be spending the time teaching. So let's talk about supplies first. And what I'm using today is the Silhouette Cameo 5 and the rotary blade. So the rotary blade is a specialty tool that goes in carriage 2 of the Cameo. It will fit, the same rotary blade will work in the Cameo 4, the Cameo 5, all of the Plus models of those, all of the Pro models of those. It's the same rotary blade for the Cameo 4 and 5, anything that has those 2 tool holders. And it has a number 2 on it, so you know it goes in carriage 2. And one of the important things you need to know if you have not used the rotary blade before is when you take it out of the packaging, it has this little gap. The collar has been extended to kind of protect the blade. And so before you use it the first time, you need to make sure that you twist that collar until it closes the gap. So then you can see this little, it's like a little mini pizza cutter blade down there. And so that is ready, and you don't ever have to worry about twisting that. Again, just every time you open a new one, you'll need to twist that and expose the blade. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in carriage 2, so I don't forget about that. And then when you are working with crepe paper, you're going to use a sticky cutting mat. So this cutting mat, you can see I've put a little sticky note on there, and it says for crepe paper. So that's how I remember at home that I keep a dedicated mat just for crepe paper. It needs to be sticky, so you don't need to use like the strong tack mat. You can, but if you just use the standard tack mat and keep it just for crepe paper, that will prevent it from collecting a lot of debris. So if you get a lot of debris and stuff on your mat, that will affect the cuts on the crepe paper. So I just keep a really sticky mat, and I save it just for crepe paper. And when it starts losing its grip while cutting, then I know it's time to just turn this into a regular mat for all my other projects and get another new mat just for crepe paper. The crepe paper that we are using today is sold by Michaels. So it's this fun pack of all these fun, I think it might be a Fiesta color. Anyway, it's got all these fun colors in it. And this project it can use this type of crepe paper. There are a lot of different types of crepe paper, but this project is so simple that the Michaels crepe paper is great. And it's got these fun colors that work for the crocuses. So I'm going to use a dark purple, and there's 2 greens in there. You could use either of the greens. Those would be pretty. I picked the brighter spring green. And then there's an orange in there. It's for the crocus centers. And there it is. Kind of a white or an off-white. So those are the colors we're using for the crocuses. Just briefly, I wanted to talk to you about crepe paper in general. There are different weights and stretchiness of crepe paper. And so I brought kind of a little sample. I don't know, maybe we want to do an overhead shot. We've got several different types of crepe paper here. So this is the Michaels crepe paper. And if I stretch it, you can see it doesn't stretch very far. That is not typically a crepe paper I would use for flowers that need a lot of detail, but for these crepe paper crocuses, it's totally fine. It doesn't need a lot of stretch. This is a 60-gram crepe paper, and I'm going to stretch it. So it's got these grain lines. I don't know if you can see them, but it's got these grain lines. So I'm stretching along the grain, and you can see this 60-gram crepe paper will stretch a little bit further. And then this is it's an extra fine crepe paper. It's actually a Leah Griffith, which is a common brand. And that is really similar to this one, but it does stretch a little further. You can see these all started at the same size. This one is a 90-gram floristic crepe paper. It is made for crepe paper flowers. That's a crazy amount of stretch. It's also pretty lightweight once it's stretched out, but that's a big difference. And then that is an Italian. This one's Italian, this one's German, this one's Italian, and then this is 180 gram, which is generally the heaviest. And it is also Italian. So this one doesn't stretch quite as far as the 90, but it stretches further than these other ones. But this one's a pretty heavy crepe paper, so that's when you're done stretching it, it's a lot thicker and more robust. And then this is it's called a doublet or a double-sided, and it's actually really good for crocuses. It doesn't stretch very far. Similar, if maybe even a little shorter than the Michaels brand, but it is thicker. It's actually two colors fused together. So those, you are going to choose different types of crepe paper depending on what you want to do. So that's just kind of a quick rundown on crepe paper options. And if what you have at the moment is the Michaels crepe paper, then you can get used to using that. And then if you decide you really like doing that, then you can go into buying other crepe papers and exploring more of what you can do with your crepe paper flowers. Okay, so I mentioned the sticky cutting mat, the rotary blade, the Cameo. The other things we're going to need when you're making crepe paper flowers, basically you're using crepe paper, wire, and glue. The glue I'm using, I have a hot glue gun heating off to the side. You can use a low temperature or a high temperature hot glue gun. At some point, we'll also use this craft glue. So for this one, any good strong white craft glue is good. There's a lot of brands. This one is my favorite at the moment, Barely Art Precision Craft Glue. It dries clear and it's really strong. The wire we're using, this is an 18 gauge wire. It's a little bit thicker. It's not the kind that you would find on a roll. Your higher gauge is thinner, and sometimes you can find it in stems like this. Sometimes you can find it in a roll. I'm just using the 18 gauge, and this one is a cloth covered. I also like a paper covered. If it's got either cloth or paper covering, it's easier to have the glue and the petals stick to it. So if you have the exposed wire, it's a little trickier. So I like cloth or paper covered. Other things we will use, sharp scissors. So we use our silhouette cutting machine for a lot of things, but you almost never get away with crepe paper flowers without doing a little bit of hand cutting. So really fine tip scissors are important. We'll need some wire cutters. For this project, we're going to use just a small little pot. I actually 3D printed this pot with the Silhouette Alta to make it the size I wanted, but it's kind of like a 3-inch by 3-inch, just something kind of shallow. If you have it wider or taller, it's okay. You just need to make more crocuses to fill it up. So this one is good for just a few crocuses at this small size. And then the other things we'll use to get those crocuses to stay in place is some floral foam, and you can use any type of dry foam. It doesn't matter how dense it is. And then we use just a little bit of Spanish moss. You could even use little petals, something that will cover your foam, your floral foam, after you stick the flowers in there. And then optionally, we're using purple crocuses that have some white and the green leaves. And so you might want to use, if you want to be a little fancy, you can use some colored pencils to use for like blending or striping. But that's totally optional. You don't have to use colored pencils. All right, so that is the rundown on getting started with crepe paper. So, let's see, I don't see any questions yet that haven't been answered. So let's go ahead and move into the software and get going on this project. So I'm going to share my screen with you. All right, so I am using Silhouette Studio version 5. So if you are still using version 4, it will be similar, but you may see things a little bit different. But Silhouette Studio 5 is working great for me, so I'm using it. All right, so I am in, when you first open your Silhouette Studio 5, you're going to see this home screen. And all I've done is just gone to my design tab. So first thing I want to do is make sure that my page setup is the way I want it. So my machine, let's see, if you don't see the page setup, it's just this upper left corner, upper on the right hand side of your screen, the top one. It says page setup. So the machine I'm using, you'll set it for the one you are using. I'm doing the Cameo 5. And then my cutting mat, I'm using a 12 by 12 inch cutting mat. Just as a note, if you're wondering, if you have the electrostatic mat, you cannot cut crepe paper with the electrostatic mat. Basically, anything the rotary blade is going to cut is not a suitable material for the electrostatic mat. You need that good sticky mat because well, the electrostatic mat won't hold crepe paper because of its texture, and then other things like felt are too porous. So sticky cutting mat, 12 by 12 inch. My media size, that's the size of crepe paper you're using. And since this Michael's crepe paper just comes conveniently in these nice 12 by 12 sheets, I've got my media size set for 12 by 12. Okay, so now we need to open our design. If you haven't purchased it already, it is number 1244741. And if you're looking for it after the fact, you can just start typing Crocus or crepe paper in your search bar. And that's what I've done here. And so here's my crepe paper Crocus. I'm just going to double click to open it, and it pops onto my screen. So we're only going to cut one color at a time. One of the nice things about Silhouette is that when you are wanting to cut something and just one thing, and you know what you want to cut, that's the only thing you leave on your mat. You move everything else off to the side. So we'll start with the purple. And you can see right here, these three little lines. When you have a crepe paper design, you should be given a little indicator of what direction to put your grain lines. So there are definitely grain lines, and you saw when I stretched that crepe paper, I had to stretch it with my grain lines going up and down, and that way it's stretched side to side. It won't stretch the other direction. So that's very important when you're doing crepe paper. You need to know which direction those grain lines should be. And usually, I don't think I've ever seen it where they put them sideways. So generally, you're putting your designs up and down for your crepe paper. All right, so I'm also going to move those grain lines off. Ooh, excuse me. Okay, so that's it for setup for the purple. So I'm going to go to the Send tab. And if you start in guided mode, it's going to ask you to connect your machine. I've already connected mine, and it's checked my firmware, and I'm up to date. And so I'm just actually going to move on to the standard tab because I know what I want to do. If you do need that guided mode, it will move it all forward for you. Just ask you what you need, what you're planning on doing, what machine you're using, that kind of thing. All right, so what I've got right now is these purple crocus petals, but I'm using, by default, it has it selected for tool 1. I need to select that for tool 2. In fact, I'm going to select everything except those grain lines. And I'm going to say down here, tool 2, use all selected lines. And what that's going to do is tell everything that everything I have selected is going to say I'm using with tool 2. And you're only going to see those bold lines on the page itself. And then the other thing we need to do is go over to look at tool holder 2. Oh, if you are using an older version of the software, you're just going to make sure that you're set, you still have those selected, and you want to make sure you're looking at your tool holder 2, and then you would choose cut or even cut edge for this project. For this one, Silhouette Studio version 5, I'm telling it down here, tool 2, use all selected lines. Okay, so now I've got tool holder 2 selected, and I want to choose my material. And there is a crepe paper default under C for crepe paper. So as soon as I select that, and it has the rotary blade in there, so it's detected it, what it's going to do is create automatically these smart cut lines. So these are called hooks and loops. And that is so that tiny little pizza cutter blade knows how and where to turn to get the right angle on those designs. So don't be alarmed if all of a sudden you have all these extra little marks on your page. Those are smart cut lines, and those are necessary for getting your blade in the right orientation. Okay, now the default settings for crepe paper, I don't, you will have to test it for your own machine. For my Cameo 5, I usually cut it at a force of 17. So anywhere between 15 and 17 is typically what my machines are cutting the lightweight crepe paper like this. Once you get into the heavier crepe paper, you're going to move on to like 18 for double-sided crepe paper and up to 20 for the thickest, heaviest crepe paper. But for the lightweight crepe paper, your force should generally be between 15 to 17. Okay, and then I'm leaving it a speed of 5. You don't want to go too fast. And then passes of 1. So let's go ahead and I will show you how I get that loaded. All right, so here's my sticky cutting mat. And I'm going to take my 12 by 12 inch paper. Now, you might think it's a little bit delicate, and it is, but because of this texture on there, it really does not want to stick tightly to the mat. That's why we use a sticky cutting mat. And so be careful as you're putting it on. I am orienting my brain vertically. So I have my arrows here for how it's going to feed into the machine, and I know what direction my petals are. So my grain line needs to be vertical. That's what I'm talking about with those little lines on the screen that need to be oriented vertically. And this paper is pre-cut to 12 by 12 inches. It's not completely 12 inches, so it could stretch that a little bit, but really I'm just going to make sure that my design itself doesn't go all the way over to that edge. So good sticky mat, and then I also like to use a brayer or just an empty vinyl roll, and give that a good press onto the cutting mat. If your paper is not stuck well enough, it will start to lift as it cuts. And then the other thing I'm using is my roll feeder on the Cameo machine. So let's see. Do you have a question? Okay, so if you're missing the cut loops, and is it a Cameo 4 or, I mean, which Silhouette Studio are you running? A Studio 4, Silhouette Studio 4 or Silhouette Studio 5? Okay, so the things you need to do to make sure that those loops show is you need to have your object selected. You need to choose not the red, use all selected lines. You need to use the blue, tool 2. Make sure it's saying tool 2, use all selected lines. And for tool holder 2 over here, you need to choose a material that uses the rotary blade. So if you have it saying cardstock or something like that, it won't show those loops. You need to have it showing crepe paper or felt, one of those fabrics, something that actually recognizes the rotary blade. So make sure it says crepe paper. And if you have those things checked, those loops should show. All right. So I have got my roll feeder actually attached to my Cameo 5. The roll feeder is an extra support. So if you've got your material pressed down really well on there, and you have this roll feeder, it's on there, but it's still closed. I haven't popped open all the things to put a roll of vinyl on there, but it's this really nice surface that keeps your mat really pretty flat. And so that's why I use a roll feeder. Yeah. Okay, let me move Cameo 5 over here. And make sure it's got room behind it. Okay, so I've loaded my mat, so it's left edge is lined up with this guideline, and I've made sure that my right roller is set for the cutting mat, so it rolls on the non-sticky part of the mat. And so with that set up, I'm just gonna load, which probably can't see that part, but you'll be able to see some of this. All right, so I'm just gonna click send. All right, so as this cuts, you're gonna see that the rotary blade is doing the cuts for the actual material, and then it's also doing those little hooks and loops to reorient the blade. So it kind of lifts just a little bit and does it lighter on those hooks and loops, and then it presses down harder while it's doing the cut for the petal itself. And this is not necessarily a fast process, but when I'm doing crepe paper, a lot of times I will be doing something else at the same time. So if there is a part that I need to hand cut, I'll be off cutting, or you know, something that's already been cut, I'll start doing my coloring or stretching while this is doing it. So it really helps me to multitask. And sometimes it's faster to just cut the petals itself with scissors. but a lot of times the machine is either faster or you can multitask and be doing something else while the machine is doing its work. Kind of like dishwashers and washing machines. I let them do work for me so I can do something else at the same time. Okay, so now you can see these petals have cut. So when you are peeling your crepe paper off the mat, it's a good idea to kind of lift, kind of curl your mat, and they will start to pop off. And then you want to pull them off in the direction of the grain, because if you pull them off sideways, if they're stuck really good, they might start to stretch. We want to pull them off in the direction of the grain so they don't stretch until we want them to. All right, so that was 6 petals. Also, my mat's not super sticky right now, but I will also pull my crepe paper off in the direction of the grain, especially if I want to use it again. If I'm pulling it off to the side, it could stretch. We don't want to do that. All right, so next, let's go ahead and set up I'll show you how I switch over to a different design. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the design tab, and I'm going to move those purple ones off to the side. I don't need them anymore. Let's go ahead and cut the white ones. So I'm just, anything off the mat is not going to cut. I'm going to put the white ones back on the mat. Go to my Send tab, and they should already have the hooks and loops because I selected them earlier when I was choosing that tool too. And crepe paper, everything else is ready. It knows I'm not loaded yet, so let's go ahead and load. Once I have that loaded, I'm just going to click the Send button again. So I'm just going to do this second color, and then I'll show you. I've just for the interest of time. We should move on to assembling. So if you're watching the replay on this, you can cut your white ones and then pause and cut your green things. And the orange one we're actually going to cut by hand. It's just a lot faster for rectangles to just cut by hand. Okay, so while this one, load the white, I'll press Send. All right, so this orange one, while that's cutting, the orange one is actually really easy. And it doesn't have to be exactly right. You can just select it in your software and see how much you need. Like it'll say the dimensions 1 inch by 1.5 inches or whatever it is. But when you're cutting crepe paper, again, just make sure you're doing the direction of the grain correctly. It should be wider along those grain lines. And one of the nice things about crepe paper is if it doesn't end up in exactly that shape that it shows on the screen, it's fine because you're going to be manipulating it and changing the shape anyways. Okay, so there's our white. And let's see where, okay, so I'm going to curl it a little bit and start to pop those off. And so basically the template you get is for 1 crocus. And if you wanted to make like 5 or 6 crocuses, you would just duplicate those to match however many crocuses you want to make. But we don't have a lot of time, extra time. So at this point, go ahead and cut your green ones. But I want to move on to kind of assembling. Unless you feel like you need to see the green, we might have time. Oop. We're done with the machine. So we've got 6 petals in purple. And of course, crocuses come in variations on purple, white, and yellow usually. But if they're your flowers, so you can make them whatever color you want. All right, and I'll just grab a bunch of leaves. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is we'll take our wire, and this needs to be about 4 inches. And we can use a ruler or we can just eyeball it. You would cut enough for all of your crocuses. You just need 1 stem per flower. Let's see. We'll start with the orange center. So these are just based on the crocuses I have in my yard, the purple crocuses, and the centers can be a little bit different, but this way I'm doing it works pretty good for a crocus. So this is called ruffling. We're just going to take, we've got our grain lines oriented this way, and we're just going to take the top edge and just kind of stretch it. So you can pull your fingers opposite each other. Don't pull too hard because crepe paper will tear, but we're just stretching, and you can just stretch out the top. So we've got one edge that's kind of flared and one edge that is the same. So this is called ruffling. And if you have a stretchier crepe paper, you might not need to stretch too much. On this one, I'm basically stretching it completely, the full amount that it will stretch. Okay, and so then on this ruffly side, we're going to cut into it. So we're going to leave this unstretched edge. We're going to leave maybe a 1/4 inch not cut, but we're going to use our scissors and cut about 5 cuts into it, 4 cuts into it. It's going to leave us with 5 little sections, and they don't have to be perfectly even. And then we're going to just kind of roll it, take the whole thing and roll it between our fingers. And then don't stretch out the bottom. Make sure you're being gentle here. And then if you want to, you can actually roll each individual segment of this. If you need to lick your fingers to get a better grip on that, it's okay. That's normal. Mine's working pretty good for me. Okay, so I've got these 5 little individual segments, and you can kind of flare them out a little more at the top if you need to. But at this point, I'm ready to glue it to the tip of my wire. So I'm going to use my hot glue gun. And you can use white glue here, but it just takes a little bit longer to dry. So hot glue gun just along the edge there. And then I'm just going to roll the tip so it doesn't extend up to where you can see it. Just going to roll that along there while it's still hot. If you're doing a longer strip, you might need to do that in segments of a little bit of glue, roll it, and then a little bit more glue. And then we're just going to kind of flare these out. They won't be seen very much, but it's just to give an impression. Okay, we have a question?
Watch this replay later.
Yeah, so this replay is going to be on the Michael's Community Classroom YouTube channel. I will also post a link to that video on my blog, findingtimetocreate.com. And then also, if you found it on the Silhouette 101 blog, I'll also post a link there. So if you're trying to find it directly, it's on Michael's Community Classroom YouTube channel. And then you would just type in the search like Crepe Paper, Crocuses, or Silhouette, and you'll find that. Okay, so there's our tip. And now we're ready for the petals. Let me get keep my glue gun hot. Okay, so these petals, again, it will depend on what type of crepe paper you're using, how much stretch it has to it. On this Michael's crepe paper, we can pretty much stretch the whole thing. We're not going to stretch the edges though. We're just going to focus the stretch right in the center. So you're basically just pushing your thumbs and pulling, so thumbs and index finger. And so you're not stretching all the way to the edge. You're stretching that center and not all the way to the top and not down here. It's just kind of focused right here. So you're trying to get this little cup for your crepe paper. If you need to stretch it a little bit down as you get lower, that will help keep it from curling and twisting too much. But what you're looking for is this little cupping shape. So just stretching right in the center, thumb and index finger, trying to make that little cup shape, and just do the same thing with all of your petals. Now, as you're stretching and working with these, if you see little flaws in the crepe paper, you're fine to just go take your scissors. If it cut little nicks out of it, these days the Silhouette Cameo does it pretty good. The software is pretty good. And then if it does ever cut nicks in there, it's fine, because sometimes people will cut their own little pieces in there to make it look like bug bites and makes it look more natural. So if it's not flawless, that's totally fine. That goes with realistic looking flowers. All right, two more. Just creating that cupping shape. And kind of what I go by, don't be too disappointed if your very first flower doesn't look perfect. A lot of times if I'm doing a new flower, by the third try, I've got it looking the way I want, and my third flower and beyond that will look the way I want. So if your first one doesn't look flawless, that's okay. Just make another one, maybe two more, and then you will get to the point where it starts to look the way you want. But this is a pretty easy flower. Hopefully it'll work out for you. Okay, so now we're ready to take 3 of our petals and put them around at the edge. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of hot glue there, and we're going to line up the bottom of the purple with the bottom of the orange. So just a little bit down there. You don't want it to get too much. Just lining up the tip of that purple with the orange. And I think I mentioned you can do high temperature hot glue or low temperature hot glue. It depends on how worried you are about burning yourself. The high temperature stays hot just a little bit longer, so you've got a little bit more time to work with it, but low temperature will not burn you so quickly. Okay, so this, I'm just kind of doing spacing these evenly, so I'm looking for not necessarily a triangle, but you're gonna have these 3 evenly spaced. And again, just kind of matching up the purple with the orange. Mine went down just a little bit lower, but then I kept the edges even with each other. So this one's easy because you don't have to worry about rotation or changing the depth. Next three, oh yeah, another question?
So if this pattern works to cut out by hand as well.
Yes, so if you want to cut this by hand, you can actually cut those pieces. Instead of cutting them with crepe paper, you can cut them with cardstock. The easiest way to do that is when they're still, you can cut them all on cardstock, and when they're still on the mat, just draw your little grain lines with a pen before you pull them off so you know what direction your grain line should match up. And then you would just take your, kind of like I did with that orange piece, you would just take your cardstock template and line up the grain lines and cut around where your cardstock template is. And it's really helpful when you're doing that. You can hold it with your fingers, but you can also use little sewing clips. So you can, we'll say I'm using this as a cardstock template. You can use a couple of sewing clips, and then you just cut around there with sewing clips that you can move as you hold that in place. So yeah, that's a great question. Especially if you don't have a machine that uses the rotary blade, you can still use these crepe paper templates by hand, or if it's something that is too complex to cut by hand, there are some fancy leaves that I don't attempt with the rotary blade, and I will cut them by hand with a cardstock template. Okay, another question.
Machine is just cutting little notches all along the cutting line.
Okay, so my first question would be, are you using an updated version of the software? There was an older version of the software that did not cut crepe paper all that well. And it is should be working with the current versions.
4.5.
Yeah, 4.5 should be working. I might need you to reach out to me separately on that. It should be working okay in version 4.5. You've cut it before. Is it showing, I guess the next question would be, is it showing the hooks and loops where they're supposed to be? And is it cutting somewhere other than where those hooks and loops are showing? Okay, my next petals, I'm going in between, so there's kind of a dip there. I'm filling in that gap, but leaving the bottom lined up the same. Just kind of, with my next layer of petals, I'm just filling in those spaces from the prior row of petals. And sometimes people like to do this upside down. It might be easier for you to do this upside down. To get the placement the way you want. Okay, so there I have all 6 petals on there. And you can see just that little pop of orange down there, and you can see why it wasn't really important to get that super accurate down there, because it's really not, you don't see the detail, but you get that feel of realism. All right, so those are our petals. Susan, I would say maybe try a different shape. Sometimes if your shapes are too close together, it might confuse those smart hooks and loops. So you can spread your designs out a little bit, or
the cutting area also helps because the AI will change where those are.
yes. So if you change where your shapes are on the cutting mat, it might help. And try cutting a different shape and see. So simpler shapes are better. It doesn't want to cut things smaller than maybe like a 3/4 of an inch. Try just one petal. Okay. You may need to reach out to me on that separately or talk to customer support because it should be working fine with the version you're using. All right, what I'm doing next, back to the flower, is I am doing a stem wrap. So what I'm taking a scrap of this purple. I'll show. Here's my little sample. I'm going to wrap partially down to cover the wire. And so what I need to do for that is make sure the grain lines are this way. And then I'm just going to cut a little, maybe not quite 1/2 inch tall. And so I can stretch this along the grain lines, and I'm just going to wrap down the wire to cover that green. So here's where I'm going to use my white glue because the hot glue is just too bulky for this. You can do it. I've seen it done. I prefer white glue for this. So I'm just going to put some white glue on the beginning of my strip, and I'm going to overlap just a little bit on the purple. Once I have that kind of pressed up against the base of the petal, then I can just add more glue to the crepe paper itself, or I can add it straight to the wire. And I'm just going to wrap down about 1 inch, and then I can tear it or cut it, and then make sure your unfinished little tab sticking out gets its own bit of glue that you can roll that on there. And so half of the wire I'm covering with purple, and half of it I'm covering with white. So same thing, I'm just going to grab some white and just cut off a little strip of it. And you could do it purple all the way down. You could do it green. Kind of look at a picture of the crocus you're modeling it after. So I will usually Google images of the flowers I'm working on, so I have a reference. This one I was just using photos from tulips I grew, or crocuses I grew last year. So again, white glue on the edge, and then just going to start to roll it down. Oops. Make sure it's overlapping that purple just a little bit so you don't see any green. And then just going to put glue on the wire all the way down, and then just kind of wrap. And I like to stretch out my crepe paper first before I wrap it, but you can also stretch it as you wrap it if you feel like that gives you a smoother finish or easier motion for you. Okay, so I'll cut off that extra, give it a little bit of glue, and just finish wrapping that. All right, and then the leaves and, oh, I can't remember what I called these white pieces. Sheaths. So the sheaths and the leaves are kind of both tucked in there as you go. So you can start with a sheath, and we're going to take like the top 2/3. We're going to stretch out the top 2/3 completely with this low stretch crepe paper. So this time you can go all the way to the edge. With the petals, we didn't go all the way, didn't stretch all the way to the edge, but with the sheaths you can. So stretch. And if you leave a little bit of unstretched, that's totally fine. And if it curls a little bit, that's also fine. We're just not stretching all the way to the base. Okay, so there's our sheaths. And then the leaves, I didn't actually, we don't need to stretch these. The crocus leaves that I was looking at are pretty tiny. And so basically you can just twist these so they're kind of tight. And if you want to put a little fold in there, you can, or you can just leave them tight if you want to like fold it lengthwise. Then I still twist it just to give it that kind of skinnier crocus look for the leaves. All right, so we'll go ahead and start gluing on one of our sheaths. So I'm going to put glue on the bottom. Don't use too much glue because it will get soggy, but you want enough glue that it will stick. So the crocuses, depending on how mature they are, sometimes these sheaths will go all the way to the top. Sometimes they will still be down at the base. I kind of overlapped just a little bit on mine. So it's just going up a little bit of the crocus onto the purple. And then can do a leaf. And the leaves also, some crocuses, they go all the way to the top or extend even further up. So I'm just going to kind of get a little flat area for the leaf. And I'm just going to do it on the opposite side of the sheath. Really, you can place them anywhere. Do another one. Your fingers will get kind of gluey. If you want to have little wet wipes for your fingers when you're working with crepe paper, you can do that if the glue bothers you, or just wash your hands a lot, but you will get glue on your fingers, just warning you. All right, so this time, this next sheath, I'm going to do down just a little bit, maybe a ½ inch lower, and kind of on the opposite side of where I put the first one. So it's kind of covering that attachment point where the leaves are. And we'll do one more leaf. Just alternating a little bit wet side going on. And you can have your leaves the same height, or you can have them with some variation. And then this third little sheath, I'll just kind of cover that other leaf connection point. And that is basically it. So you would just do that same thing for all of your crocuses. And if they look different than mine, that's fine. Kind of your goal is to make your flowers generally look similar to each other and not necessarily have to meet that model. And so I can just put these crocuses in my little pot. And again, this is just a piece of floral foam that I just shaved down so it would fit in the pot, and then stuck the little Spanish moss on top. And so the crocuses can just go in there. And then for these leaves, if you've got extra leaves, you can just make little bunches of maybe 3. And I would stick those on just a short piece of wire. Again, I would use probably hot glue. Stick those leaves on there, and that way you can kind of fill in the pot. So it doesn't have to be packed with crocuses, but it's a little more realistic to have some of those leaves in there with them to fill in some of that space. So just little bunches of leaves like that on short pieces of the stem. And then they can be stuck in there amongst the crocuses to kind of fill that in. All right, do we have any other questions? Oh, thanks, Ellie Mae. You know I love crepe paper. Yeah, so that is our crocus. And that's one of the simplest ones you can do. You can go crazy, but it's nice to be able to do a simple flower to get started. You can also, with the rotary blade, you can cut felt, you can cut fabric. Felt also is really fun for making 3-dimensional flowers like this. But it's just a super fun medium. And once you get used to the rotary blade and understand those hooks and loops, and just make sure you've got, if it's cutting oddly, you might just want to spread your designs out across the page, ungroup them and spread them out further, and maybe have fewer on the page. And if you do have questions on crepe paper, I've got my website that's findingtimetocreate.com, and you can reach out to me there. But if you want to rewatch this, then it's on the Michael's Community Classroom YouTube channel. Okay, we've got another question.
Right side to the crepe paper.
Oh, a right side to the crepe paper. So the only thing with the crepe paper, it's the same on both sides if you're talking about a right side that way, but you always pay attention to the grain lines. So in that sense, there's a right direction to the crepe paper. You want to make sure that your grain lines on your crepe paper match up to whatever visual cue you've got on your grain lines for your template. Another question?
You have to be sure that the loops don't overlap if the pieces are close together.
So the loops should not cut into the design itself, but if the loops overlap each other, that's totally fine. The technology, the algorithms for the software are supposed to place all those hooks and loops not on the pattern itself, so they should not be cutting into the design, but if they're cutting on that extra space on the paper and cutting into each other, that's totally fine. And usually they're cutting at a lighter depth, so they're not even cutting all the way through your material on the places where they cut. Okay, do we have any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope I've created some new crepe paper florists out there. Um, and if you're interested, we've got another class, Michael's class, on April 10th. So watch for that to come out, and hopefully I'll see you there. But I hope you enjoyed this class, and thank you so much for being here.